Hi guys, I'm Kat and welcome back to my channel. So today's video isn't really anything that is necessarily spooky, but it is something that I believe falls into the realm of October and spooky season. Some people do believe that the veil kind of thins in October, especially on the 31st, to where souls and spirits can come through the veil and be able to visit loved ones or cause havoc or whatever they may do. I do think that around this time of year, leading up to Christmas time, the veil does lessen or kind of thin, because these are the high energy months where there's so much high energy from all of just, Thanksgiving and Christmas and everything that's going on, that I do think that it is something that potentially spirits can feed off of. So I do think that the veil does thin and give whatever the opportunity to become more intense. And I do think that includes like certain abilities, like empathic abilities, or if you are very intuitive or potentially psychic. I do think this time of year is more intense and things can occur more because of that. I know that I've had more experiences with my being an empath, or sometimes my psychic tendencies or having paranormal experiences do typically happen around this time of year more so than in the quieter months. So I think it does kind of fall into the realm of October. So today we are going to be talking about past lives and reincarnation, which is something that really interests me on a very high level, and something that I've really looked into and started to read about because I find it extremely fascinating. I don't think that when you die, your soul just goes wherever it goes and then that's it. I don't think that, even though I do believe in ghosts, I do think that's one thing that could potentially happen to you, is that when your spirit, your essence is left behind to kind of be an essence. I don't know if I believe in like unfinished business, but that could be a potential thing. I do think that if you die tragically, you might get stuck where you died, but I do also think that there is that chance that when you do die, your soul leaves your body and then it can go into a new living creature in a new body, and then continue the life cycle, which basically reincarnation is. If you're not sure what reincarnation is basically when your soul leaves your body after biological death and goes into another living thing to continue the life cycle. So I actually wrote down, because I had to look it up because I didn't want to get it wrong, so I wrote it down in my little book here, so I'm gonna quickly read it. But basically, reincarnation is the philosophical or religious concept that the non-physical essence of a living being starts a new life in a different physical form or body after biological death. It is also called rebirth or transmigration. So I do think that when your soul leaves your body, it has to go somewhere. And I'm not someone that believes in heaven or hell. But I'm not really necessarily sure where your soul can go. But to me, just in my mind and the way I feel, it makes sense that your soul would just be reborn in another living thing. And it doesn't have to be another human. You could be reborn in like an animal. And there are a lot of religions that also believe in reincarnation, like Hinduism, Buddhism, I'm not going to say this right, but Jainism, I'm not going to say that right, but I know that they believe that, and I know that certain religions don't eat a particular animal meat from an animal, because it could be potentially your family member. Don't know if that's accurate, but I do know that some religions believe in that when you die, your soul goes in to be reborn. And there have been cases of people having experiences where they remember things from their past life and being reincarnation into it. It's mostly children that have a lot of experiences of remembering things that happened to them that they couldn't possibly remember because they're really little. And I do think that children are more susceptible to certain things because they're young and they haven't developed very much, and their minds and everything about them are more open, so that's why I think they have more paranormal experiences, or they see more things, or they remember more things, because they haven't been broken into being an adult, but also because after a while of being an adult, you do start to lose that inner eye unfortunately. I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe it's because you start to see the world in a different way. But there have been cases of people having experiences with remembering things that couldn't have possibly happened to them, or knowing information that they could never possibly know. I do also believe that reincarnation isn't just a human thing. I think animals can be reincarnated too. I do think that, like, dogs can be reincarnated into other dogs. I do believe that my family had a dog named Shang, and he got hit by a car and he died. And then about a year later, we got a new puppy, and he was a black lab, and we named him Nigel. And there was a lot of mannerisms or personality traits that our lab had that Shang had. And I do think that they were the same dog, just in different bodies, which does sound a little crazy. I do realize that it does sound crazy and unfathomable, and some people don't believe what they can't see, but this is something that I've believed in for a really long time, and that I feel with every part of my being makes sense. Also, fun fact, a lot of the reason that I wanted to make this video was because there was something my mom told me a long time ago that I said to someone that I think is kind of funny, but is really interesting. So I guess when I was little, she didn't say how old I was, but she said that she had a friend over, and that I walked up to her friend and I told her that I burned in a fire when I was a little boy once. Which is something very interesting to say to someone, especially when you're little. Now, this could be one of three things. Either my sister and my cousins told me to go say that to her. I've always been fucked up and just really twisted and dark, so that hasn't changed, so I could have just said that to her to freak her out. Or maybe I had a memory of being a little boy and dying in a fire. That could be possible. And if that is, that's extremely interesting. But I think that is the one time I ever brought it up, so I don't know. It could be really fascinating, but it's something that has really wanted me to make a video about it, and it just, I don't know why, it just randomly occurred to me, and I just wanted to make a video about it because I haven't thought about it in a long time, and then it just kind of hit me. But this intro, if you can call it an intro, has been much longer than I wanted it to be, but I'm going to be talking about 3 different cases of reincarnation and of people remembering their past lives that I found extremely fascinating, one of them being one of the most popular cases of reincarnation and of people remembering things that they possibly couldn't. So let's get into that before I keep babbling. First one I'm going to be talking about is about a man named Bruce Whittier. I wrote a lot of it down in this book because I didn't want to forget any of it. So if you see me looking down at it, that's why. So there was a man named Bruce Whittier who kept having reoccurring dreams about a Jewish man that was hiding in his house with his family, I believe probably around World War I or II. The man dreamed that his name was Stefan Horowitz and that he was a Jewish man hiding in his house, and that eventually he got caught and was brought to a concentration camp along with his family, where he ended up dying. Bruce would end up waking up with like panic attacks. He would feel restless and really stressed from it, and he couldn't figure out why. Eventually he started having dreams about this clock, a very specific clock that would just pop up in his brain, and he would end up having dreams about it all of the time, reoccurring every single night. Eventually he had a dream about the clock being in an antique shop, and on the off chance that possibly this antique shop was real, he ended up starting looking for it, and he ended up finding that exact antique shop. So he traveled to it, and he ended up finding that very same clock sitting in the window, and he could actually see it. Every single detail that was in his dream was on this clock. So he ended up asking the antique shop owner where the clock came from, and he found out that the owner of the clock was actually a German major that lived in the Netherlands and died several years before that. Now, what I find fascinating about this is that this was an object that he couldn't possibly have known about. He couldn't have remembered it unless at some point, sorry, we were interrupted by my cat's ear. But anyway, unless I guess if we were to explain it away or to debunk it, he could have potentially seen that antique shop in passing and then seen the clock and then started having really, really vivid dreams about it, and his mind could have made up a story. But the fact of the matter is he had been having a dream about this clock, about a man in a house. And now people would ask, well, why would he have a dream about a different man named Stefan Horowitz in a house hiding? But the clock belonged to a German major in the Netherlands. And my thought process was, maybe after this man, Stefan Horowitz, was found in his house and taken to the concentration camp, the major took the clock and brought it into his own home. And then after he died, it was brought to an old antique shop. That is my theory. But I just do find it very interesting that he started having these reoccurring dreams about his life and about something really sad, and he could feel it, and then he started having dreams about this clock. The story didn't say that he bought the clock or that he wanted to have the clock or any significance about the clock, so that's why that was the first one I wanted to tell you. But that's why it's one of those things where it could be something else and not reincarnation. But I think it could potentially be from a past life, because remembering the clock in such detail, but also having a dream about that exact antique shop, I just find extremely interesting. The next case that we're going to talk about is about a little boy named Gus Taylor, who was 18 months old. He had a tendency of saying that he was his own grandfather to family and friends, which to some people might not seem that odd, because children have a tendency of saying the weirdest shit all of the time, and you know, it's a really confusing time when you're trying to figure out who you are as a conscious person. But what I found really interesting and what made it odd was that his grandfather died about a year before he was born, so he didn't really meet his grandfather and he didn't really know much about him. So the fact that he identified as his grandfather was really odd to his family. But also, whenever his family would show him a picture of his grandfather or a family picture, he would point out at him and say, oh yeah, that's Grandpa Augie, that's me, and would identify as Grandpa Augie completely and believe himself to be that person. But what made me so interested in this one in particular is that, so the secret from the family is that Grandpa Augie had a sister, and she was murdered and her body was dumped in the San Francisco Bay, which is obviously something that Gus didn't know because he's a little boy, but also something that they never spoke about in front of him. So he didn't know that Grandpa Augie even had a sister, but he would talk about her as if he knew her. He would bring her up and talk about Grandpa Augie's dead sister all of the time, which was odd to him because he was only 4 years old. So how could he possibly know about this woman when nobody had told him about it? Which is very strange, because that's what I mean from when little kids knowing things that there's no way that they could have known. And a lot of people will say, well, maybe he found something like in the family's home. Maybe he did that. But why would they have something like that just sitting around the house that he could find? But another part that I found extremely interesting, that he told his family that God gave him a ticket, and with this ticket he was able to travel through a hole until he was born as Gus. Which to me, for a 4-year-old, that is some very vivid, detailed shit to say. And while kids are extremely creative, there are some cases where it's like, how can they possibly say something that creative? I know children are getting smarter and smarter as we go in life, but there are times where it's like a little kid has said things to me that I don't understand how they could possibly know that. And so I really found this one fascinating, because this was a 4-year-old kid who was having these memories of this woman who died many years before he was even born, who was murdered. But he's also identifying as this person that he's never met and that he's probably only heard his name of. But he identifies as this person so strongly and believes that he's this person so strongly when he's only 4 years old and doesn't know who he is. But he's so set on being Grandpa Augie. And so I find it whenever I find stories like this about children, I think those are the ones that interest me the most, more than adults. Because for adults, there's a chance that you could have these memories because you saw it in a TV show, you saw it walking by a store, maybe, you know, you heard a memory from something and then it stuck in your brain and then your mind convinced you this was your memory. It's absolutely possible. But when it comes to kids who haven't been on this earth for very long having specific memories, especially like that, that's when I find it more believable and more interesting and more tangible. The next case we're going to talk about is probably one of the best well-known, recognized cases of reincarnation, and that is of Ruth Simmons. Ruth Simmons was a woman who was put under a series of hypnosis sessions in 1952 by her therapist named Maury Bernstein. He would, or they would, I'm not necessarily sure what the gender is there, but they would make her regress to birth and beyond that. And whenever her therapist did that, she would develop a very thick, heavy Irish accent and would start talking about specific memories of a woman named, and I'm not going to say this correctly, Bridie Murphy. And while there's no records of this person named Bridie Murphy, she would talk about two men named Mr. Kerrigan and Mr. Farr. And so they looked into these two men that could potentially be real, and in the records of the town within the 19th century, there were two men of that name that were grocers in the town. And she would talk about Bridie Murphy going to buy food from these men. In, I believe, 1956, there was a movie that was made called The Search for Bridie Murphy, which I find really fascinating, and I'd really like to watch it because I'm sure there's more information within that movie, more information that I could find. But another part of the story that I found interesting is those two men that she talked about, when they looked to find these two men in the town's directory, they found them within the time period of 1865 to 1866. So that would make Bridie Murphy very old. Very, very old. So remembering memories from someone who is possibly from 1865 or 1866, to me, is incredible, because that is something that you would have to go deep into and do deep research into a person in order to create these memories and fool everybody around you to believe that they are real. If it was a time period like not too far from 1952, then maybe I would think that, oh, she just read a book and then her brain convinced her of these memories, and, you know, maybe she heard an Irish accent somewhere, so when she was in a sleep state of hypnosis, then, you know, she would go into an Irish accent. I don't know. But when it's something that's 1865 or 1866, to me, that's a little bit harder to believe. And you can't just accidentally be like, oh yeah, Mr. Kerrigan and Mr. Farr, but then be lucky enough to figure out that they were in the town during that time. So that's why this is a case that a lot of people believe, because this is a case that you can't fake. You can't make up. You can't convince your brain that this is real because it was so long ago. But also, when you're in hypnosis, your brain is kind of in a sleep state. You're not really thinking and making tangible thought. So it's not like she, was making this up as she was going. It was kind of a sleep state of her brain going into another part of herself. Now granted, I don't necessarily understand hypnosis. I'm not quite sure if I believe in it, but I know it's a psychological process, and I don't know enough about hypnosis to believe in it. I do know that I'm afraid of it because I don't want parts of my mind to be open that might not need to be, but I do know that it does help people remember things. I know that they do hypnosis for people who have been through really traumatic cases. And so I do believe that the hypnosis helped her remember a past life that she had as this woman, Bridie Murphy, and I think it's really cool to have these memories and to know that this happened to you, kind of, sorta, because I'm one of those people that thinks, like, because it's like reincarnation, aren't you the same person? In a sense, yes, you are the same person because you're the same soul, but your soul is in a different body that has a completely different mind. So say I'm reincarnated, I'm going to be different and a different person because my thought process is vastly different than a different person's. So the way you think and feel and even the foods you like and stuff like that are all going to be different because you will be a different person. You'll just have the same soul. It's really hard to understand or explain, but you, at the core, are the same person, but you're gonna have different thoughts and a different brain chemistry and stuff like that. And I think that's why I find reincarnation extremely fascinating, because it's fun to think about, if I was reincarnated or in a past life, what happened to me? Because I do think that past lives and reincarnations are real, because there are people that have fears that have no reason. Like, for example, I'm scared of horses. I have a phobia of horses, but I have no reason to have that. It's an unexplainable fear that I have, because I've only ridden a horse twice, and both experiences were just fine. But for some reason, if a horse is near me or I go near a horse, I feel like I'm gonna have a panic attack. I don't want to be around them. I just don't like them. I think they're beautiful creatures, but at a distance, you know? So it's like there's certain fears that I have, mostly that one, that is for absolutely no reason. There are people that have fears of the randomest things that there's no reason for it. Like people who have such severe phobias of water, like they drowned before, that for no reason they have. So it's like, I do think that that's a thing, but also just memories, having memories and feeling like you've done something before, and feeling maybe those people who, like, okay, here's a theory, absolutely crazy theory, crazy, but what if the people who are transgender don't feel like they're in the right body? So say there's a man who doesn't, like, who is born as a male, but isn't a male, he's actually female. What if in his past he was a female, in his past life he was female, and then was reborn as a man, and that's why he feels that way? I don't know if anybody's ever thought about it that way, but I have. Like, what if someone who identifies as a female, but was born as male, was a female in a past life, and they remember being female in a past life, but they were reincarnated as a male? So it feels wrong because they're not supposed to be male, they're supposed to be female. Like, what if that is where that comes from? Maybe it potentially could be. I know that sounds really crazy and I'm reaching, potentially, but it's something to think about. Like, why would someone feel like when they're female, they're born as a female, but they feel in their core, their being they're male? What if it's because they were a male once, but they came back as a female, and it just doesn't feel right? I don't know. That's something I've thought about before, and I've never said before, but I find fascinating. And it could be absolutely not true. I don't know. It could be just crazy to say, but it's a thought. Alrighty, so there you go. Those were a couple of cases of reincarnation that I found really, really fascinating. Now, for me, I know that I live on the logical side and then not so logical side. The logical side of me does believe that you need tangible evidence. How could this possibly be real? People can convince themselves of things. People can fake it a lot. So I do live there, but I also have had so many experiences in my life that it's really hard for me to not believe in certain things. So I live on both parts. It's a really interesting thing to have, because part of me is kind of a skeptic, but another part of me isn't. So it's like I believe in certain things, but then I have a hard time believing other things because I need proof of them, if that makes any sense. But this is one of the things that I do believe in with a lot of me, because I don't think that your soul just goes away. It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. It genuinely just doesn't compute in my brain that your soul is just like, you're dead and that's it. It just doesn't make sense. But yeah, you know, it's just one of those really interesting things that for some people is absolutely insane and for some people believe. But if you are someone that believes in reincarnation or has any stories, I would love to hear them, because I really like input and I love to hear certain people's opinions and seeing other sides of things, because I know there's going to be people that don't believe in reincarnation, but I know there's a lot of people that do, so I don't know. But if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And next week's video is probably going to be more on the spooky side. Possibly, I don't know, depends on what I decide to make. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to subscribe for some apparent reason, you can go ahead and do that and hit that notification bell whenever I post. Sorry this video was messy. Granted, most of my videos are, because I'm not a good planner. I'm not a planner, I'm not a script writer. I just kind of, when I get a thought and I want to make a video, I just kind of make one and hope it goes well. So I guess that's just how I work here. But again, thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you have a wonderful day and a beautiful night. Always stay spooky, and this is Kat signing off. Bye.